All right, ladies and gents, welcome to the Edge Live Q&A that we do every Friday here at Edge. For you who are new here in the audience, we at Edge, our main product is a cryptocurrency wallet that is available on iOS and Android. It supports more than a dozen digital assets, and that number is constantly growing. We actually have a new release that just came out. We'll talk about that in a moment. Who's we? Well, I'm Kylan Hurt, and I'm a developer at Edge. And today I am joined by Brett, a.k.a. Maverick, also of the Edge team. He is in charge of business development at Edge. So for those of you who are new here, every Friday we do a live Q&A at noon. Every Friday, got to make sure I got Facebook going. Every Friday where we take your questions and comments. So if you have anything that you want us to discuss, we will handle it. So we are available on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and let's see here, where else? And DLive as well. Yeah. So what topic do you want to start off with today, Brett?
Well, selfishly, I think we should start off with our new release.
All right.
Just got on the app stores on iOS and Android. It might not be exactly in everyone's app store because it takes some time to propagate throughout. But a couple of minor updates. It wasn't and there was no big changes, but there's a lot of stability and performance upgrades that'll make the app perform better in general.
Right.
I guess some of the bigger ticket items would be adding BIP70 support for Bitcoin Cash, which is really just focused on BitPay's payment protocol, right? And I think one of the reasons it has something to do with mining fees and locking in certain amounts. They have some issues when users have to manually, I guess, load their cards or they have some type of issue with payments with miners and the exact amount that's being paid. So this kind of helps facilitate the exact amount with the right mining fee. And then we also added some new visuals, terms of service screen, some user interface stability fixes, some scaling of the font sizes. So when there's different phones of different sizes, and now it can the app can dynamically kind of figure out what the appropriate size, so you don't have huge font on a small screen or small font on a big screen.
Yeah, especially if you're using a tablet, things will start to look better on some of the screens. We are working on modifying all of the screens in order to make them more responsive to the device width and height. So you'll notice changes, especially if you're on a tablet.
Yeah, so some small changes go update it. Not exactly sure what's in the next release, but I think we have another point release coming up, and then after that there will be a full scale release.
Yeah, I'm excited for that one because then we'll start to introduce custom nodes, which is something that I've been working on for a while. Obviously, we are constantly adding as many new features as we can, and we are listening to our audience and our users, trying to figure out what the user base is demanding in the next releases. So if there's a feature that you would really like, please hit us up on Twitter. I believe is it Edge Wallet or it's Edge App? I don't remember off the. Oh, it's Edge Wallet. It's Edge Wallet at Edge Wallet, and let us know what kind of features you want us to include. We try to be very responsive to our user base.
Moving on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Next thing on our list. I guess we'll go to the first question, which is
Let's do it.
Pretty basic. What happens if I accidentally sent Bitcoin or crypto in general to an address that I don't own, or to one I don't even know who it belongs to?
Don't even know who it belongs to. Yeah. In general, cryptocurrency tends to be hard to reverse with regards to the transactions. So once you've sent money somewhere, if it actually goes through, if the transaction goes through, then as a rule of thumb, don't expect that money to come back. So that's why you have to be very careful about where you are sending your money. And this is one of those things where whenever I send out cryptocurrency, I always double check the address, maybe the first few characters or digits of the address, then the last few, and just to double check that it's going to the right place.
Yeah, I think hard would be underplaying it, right? Sending it to an address you don't know, you're not going to get it back. It's irreversible unless you know who the party is and they can send you the money back.
Right.
But you're sending it over the internet, so to speak, and that it's pretty much final once it's been mined into a block and confirmed on the network. So, like Kylan said, you want to make sure you check things before you send that.
Yeah, and there's also a feature called a checksum. So I think back when Bitcoin was still relatively new, if you just put in some maybe not random characters, but if you had an address that looked like it was valid, but maybe it's kind of random numbers and stuff, the transaction may have gone through. But nowadays, each wallet, which is where you're going to be sending the actual transaction from, will check to make sure that the address that you're giving it is an actually valid address. So you can't just nowadays you can't just type in some random string of numbers that's the right length and expect it to go through. Usually the wallet now will reject that, and that's the checksum was put in place to essentially to help newbies.
Yeah, no, I've
Right.
I've been helped by that. I've scanned some things that come back, or it's like an invalid address, or I type in the wrong stuff, and I've been thankful that that's been put in as a feature for some wallets, and for ours as well.
Yep.
All right, so that's covered. Make sure you check, know what you're sending it to and who you're sending it to.
Yeah. Whenever
once you do,
go ahead.
I was just reiterating what
Yeah,
we
no,
already
I was going to
said.
say, whenever I copy and paste an address, whenever I use copy and paste for anything critical, especially on a computer, but also on a smartphone, you never know if there's something trying to intercept what you're copying and pasting. Because there's malware that specifically looks at what you're copying and pasting. If it looks like a Bitcoin address, and they'll insert their own Bitcoin address, or if it's Ethereum or whatever, to essentially try to trick you into sending it to whoever the malware coder is, programmer. So be careful out there. It's a jungle.
Okay.
So
Next, we'll go to big story, and I kind of want to get
Yeah.
your thoughts on this because
Yep.
you're the developer. I'm not a developer at all. Haven't written a line of code in my life,
Right.
and I depend on you guys to do a great job. But
That's-
there
that-
was
that's scary.
Yeah, exactly. There was a big bug that was reported and patched up and fixed, but it was a pretty serious bug, and it had to do with Bitcoin Core, which is the main reference implementation of Bitcoin. And there are other implementations, but that's pretty much the dominant one and the one that most people rely on. And basically, it seemed to be two bugs wrapped into one. One was a denial of service bug where there's potentially a lot of the nodes on the network could have been kicked off,
Right.
and some type of inflation exploitation, some type of way that miners could have double spent some coins in the same block and somehow created more coins. So I guess my question is, how does this stuff happen in software? And your thoughts on, do we need more implementations? Does that make things more complex, more confusing? Right. So what do you kind of make of it? And your thoughts.
Yeah, I would say as a coder, you always have to be careful about bugs. The thing is, with something like cryptocurrency, how would I say it? There is some reassurance, I guess, that there's a network out there kind of double checking to make sure things don't go awry, so to speak. So there is some comfort there, but then obviously that begs the question, if you're running your full node and everyone's like, okay, your full node is going to verify the transactions and make sure there's no funny business. But your full node, it's going to be running code that someone else wrote, and most people running a full node don't know what code is actually being executed in their full node. So there is this kind of like false sense of security, I guess you could say. But yeah, so in general, bugs are something that just happen with software, but with something like cryptocurrency, you have to be a lot more careful. I think that's one of the reasons why you see, like with something like Bitcoin, it takes forever for features to come through, right? They just need to test the crap out of it. And there's definitely a large amount of game theory that goes on, because you want hackers to be able to find and exploit vulnerabilities early on so that they don't exploit them later on when it actually matters more. So you want them to exploit it during testnet. For Bitcoin, I think their testnet's called Litecoin. And I think even Charlie Lee has said that openly. He's like, yeah, no, we're testnet for Bitcoin. It's like, okay, that's fine. But yeah, in general, it's hard to prevent bugs and vulnerabilities from occurring. If you know what the priorities are, this is where like priorities are great. So like with Edge, when we think about bugs, Okay, so what does that mean? Like, what are the catastrophic things that could happen? You could lose private key. I mean, that's huge. Another one is you could have something happen where like you send out to the wrong address, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, stuff like that. Whereas if you have a bug in the interface where a help modal pop-up window doesn't show up, that would be a lot lower priority, right? So just kind of keeping an eye on what the priorities are, what are the catastrophic issues that can occur. That helps a lot. But yeah, everyone, I think a lot of people are making a big deal about this bug story, and I haven't taken the closest look at it. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I think part of the reason is because Bitcoin Core and their implementation and the kind of the group around them, people have put them on a pedestal.
right,
That they're some type of like coding gods that never make mistakes.
right.
Right. And you don't want to ever say never. And it's a good, healthy reminder that this is still, even though it's software, humans produce software, and the meme of complete trustlessness has never
Yeah,
been true,
yeah,
never
yeah.
has been, never will be. This is still a human system. And the thing that was scary about this to me, because I think the thing that I care about most as someone who's a non-developer and not as I don't care as much about the payment network, but the monetary
Like
supply.
so when you see that
Right, so
inflationary,
exactly. So
that's scary, yeah?
exactly, because I think that's part of the reason what bootstrapped the whole digital gold project or Bitcoin. There's this idea of digital scarcity and inability for any party to inflate the supply, and then you hear about a potential bug that could have been exploited. Now it never was, and it's not so clear. I was digging a little bit into it, and it was hard for me to really understand exactly how someone would have done this. But I will say that this thing was identified, and the pretty detailed how they found it, how the discussion went, and their movement towards fixing it was pretty swift.
Yeah.
But it also reminds me that I as a user of this stuff, a non-technical user, I do feel more comfort in there being multiple implementations and multiple projects, right? Multiple coins, that there is no coin that's infallible or project that can't make mistakes. And I think this is a good reminder of that.
Yeah.
And that definitely was a good story for people that hate Bitcoin Core, because
who would that be? Who would dislike? I
pretty
feel like
much,
there's a
yeah.
demographic out there that maybe
that
not-
jump on it. Yeah.
Well, because I mean that was the argument, right? That Bitcoin Cash, it's just full of bugs. The coders are a bunch of amateurs. So of course, when a story like this comes out, the Bitcoin some of the Bitcoin Cash people jump on it. And
when
say,
you jump on other
see,
people's mistakes, you better watch out if you
That's
ever
right.
make a mistake. Right. If you're not very forgiving, they're not going to be very forgiving on your mistakes. But nothing adverse happened. It was just something that people are freaking out about, something that could have theoretically happened, and the problem was fixed pretty quickly.
Yeah. So that actually brings up a good topic, because you were kind of talking about, okay, well, you keep an eye on some of the like inflationary economic sort of side of the cryptocurrency, not so much the payment protocol. And this was a question, and I realized I had actually thought of this, and I didn't really know what the answer was for you. But how did you get into cryptocurrency in the beginning?
Oh,
Well,
yeah. So
what originally got you involved, I guess?
Well, I went to school and studied finance, and I was always interested in markets and economics.
Right.
And I started doing some deep dives into alternative, economic theory. I wasn't very, I guess, impressed or convinced by what I was getting taught in school, and
Right.
I kind of dove deep, and then I went down some rabbit holes, right, getting into some Austrian stuff, and I heard of Bitcoin in late 2013, and I was just like, this is a non-political asset, and they're saying it's scarce. I didn't buy any at the time because it was in this crazy bubble, and I realized, and then I started reading about it, and I was like, wow, I know nothing about technology, right? I really didn't grow up playing with any computers or doing any type of coding or anything like that. And then it took me some time to really get into that stuff and get into what a blockchain was, what public keys were, and then by 2015, I was convinced that this was the future.
Right.
I bought my first Bitcoin at the end of 2015 and haven't really looked back. But I came at it from a money, finance,
Right.
monetary economics. Wow, this might be an alternative to fiat, which I thought was a complete and utter scam. But I didn't see what were the other options, and I thought this, and I'd been learning about gold, but the gold people are always just waiting for the world to burn. And, Bitcoin was actually something that was proactive or active. And I thought the people that were building were, I guess, ideological and smart. And the ideology really gave them energy and there was just so much more to build, right? And kind of bought into the dream, so to speak.
So when you were first buying cryptocurrency, I assume Bitcoin, was it as an investment, or were you trying to use it, or?
No, definitely an investment.
Right.
I didn't like what was going on in financial markets and with central banks, and it was definitely an investment. I still have those particular coins that I bought at that time.
Wait, you said you still do have?
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Because I remember when I was buying it, I was like, these are gonna be, 3 to 5 year, at least,
Right.
And I still, my general assumptions at the time are still kind of in play, and now I find myself working at a wallet, and it's been a crazy ride. Enough about me, though.
Yeah, so it's funny.
What's going on with Kyle and Hurt?
Because you said you looked at it as an investment. So I was interested in it because I liked Austrian economics, and specifically the limited inflation part. I was like, okay, that's pretty interesting.
It's simple. It makes sense, right?
Yeah. So I was listening to Free Talk Live in 2011, and they were Ian Freeman, who's one of the hosts, was talking about how he used it to purchase products from a website with an enhanced amount of privacy. I was like, okay, well, that's really interesting. So I bought some Bitcoin and started using it on websites. I don't remember the name of the website or whatever happened to it, but you could purchase things with it just like it was a regular currency, almost like you're using Visa. Obviously, the process was very different. You're not swiping cards, you're not putting in card numbers. But I was actually using it, and I didn't even. It did occur to me that it could go up in value in the long term, and I remember thinking to myself, how high could it get? And I think I decided that not the upper limit, but the upper limit of what I thought was believable was okay, maybe it could get to 10,000. So now it's already past that. I mean, it's under it right now, but I think it'll go back up above it again. But yeah, it was interesting. So I was actually using it, and I was able to save some from my first sort of transactions of buying it. But obviously, everyone always wishes they had held on to more, right? But looking back on how much I used it and how much I had coming in and going out, I could be multimillionaire right now.
That's funny. So you came at it from a pure utility perspective, which is great. And that was part of the reason I bought. I mean, it did have utility,
right?
And I was just looking at the amount of from a monetary perspective, how much money is actually tied up in, or I shouldn't say money, what things are valued at on the market, how much money is tied up in real estate, stocks, bonds, and even what is it called, negative yielding bonds, right? Bonds that are explicitly losing money. Some sovereign bonds.
What's the point of that?
Well, that has something to do with central bank policy, which we don't have time to get into, but basically paying someone to, or what is it? You loan someone money, loan them $100, they give you 98 back, right? Why does that happen? Well, there's the complex relationship.
Even worse, probably.
Well, not necessarily. Well, a lot of it has to do with just central bank policy and them forcing banks, maybe in the Eurozone to purchase assets.
Okay.
that aren't necessarily rational, but
Right.
they need to do it to pursue their policy goals of maybe like 2% inflation or whatever it is that they think they need to do. And I was looking at the market cap of something like Bitcoin and just thinking that you don't need a lot of money to come in for a very, very positive ROI. And it was a kind of a counter narrative trade. Not a lot of people believed in it. So I thought, I like to be a little contrarian, and take the opposite side of a bet. And it definitely paid off. It was risky, but it was like something I was willing to lose money on. I didn't like how things were going in terms of markets and what central banks were doing in general.
Did Alex Jones tell you? How'd you find out about Bitcoin? What was the actual? How'd you actually hear about it for the first time?
Well, the first time I heard it on Bloomberg.
Oh, wow.
That was in 2013, but I didn't purchase it until 2 years later.
Why are people on the dark web using this scam coin?
Yeah. It was kind of like
The currency
They
that the terrorists
they
are,
weren't
are
that
using.
they weren't that negative about it. They were just like, oh, this is kind of weird.
It's still
No,
weird.
it was just something that was like, it was kind of like, I had all these, sometimes I keep lists of things that, interest me.
right.
So Bitcoin was like on that list, right? And
Got like a bookmark on some webpage.
yeah,
and,
so
let's look into it.
it was one of those things that was on my radar for a long time, but it took me a long time to really pull the trigger. Like I would say I'm pretty conservative until I like think I know something, and then I'm very aggressive.
Right.
So it took me some time. It was on my radar, and I started learning more and more about it. Started hearing more about it, and I was seeing more energy kind of coming in from VCs and people talking about the blockchain. And then, by the end of 2015, I was like, this is it. And especially for someone that was young like me, I was like,
Right.
this old system is kind of dying and ossifying.
Was young.
Yeah,
Is that past
younger,
tense now?
younger. I was younger, and I was like, this other side is full of energy and
Oh, yeah.
people building.
Oh yeah.
So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna join. I was on this other team going in that direction, and I was like, no, I'm gonna go on this team now.
Just gonna go the alternate route, the road less traveled.
Exactly.
That's you,
Yeah,
Brett.
and it's been a bumpy road, but it's been interesting.
Yeah, so I was curious, and I feel like I've had this conversation with a couple other people back when we were doing the Captain Crypto show. Hodling. Everyone talks about being a hodler, right? So that's slang for holding, which means you hold on to your currency, you don't sell it, you don't give it away, you don't, hypothetically, you don't even pay for much stuff with the cryptocurrency. The more I keep on hearing about hodling, and I've been aware of this term for a long time, like I know the strategy, everyone says just hold on to as much cryptocurrency as you can. Given how things have been with the booms and busts and the volatility, do you think that's still an effective strategy?
Well, if you think of it as saving, I think saving in general is an effective strategy. So
Right.
you should be saving value over time. I think absolute strategies are absolutely bound to fail. And
Right.
so, it's like, and it all depends on what your situation is,
Right.
I would say in general, the meme is a healthy meme, getting people to be savers and not spenders in general, which I think is like the opposite meme in the
fiat
West or
system,
fiat
right.
in general. People just, they get money and it goes out, or they even they go into debt. So I think, hodling is just saving. So you should be saving money. It's an effective way. Now, is there anything wrong with, you just went through a huge bull run and taking some profits off the table, or buying physical goods? No, because sometimes, some of the things that you're attached to can hold you back. So, and if you keep using a same strategy constantly, I don't know if that's always the best way, but if you just have a little bit amount and it doesn't really affect you,
Right.
then you can just hold it. But sometimes, if you're going through a huge bull run, it becomes a huge part of your portfolio. It might be smart for you to, take some off the table there and maybe
Give
you know,
yourself a little bit of a rainy day fund that's more
Yeah.
accessible, less volatile.
because you know the volatility is kind of here to stay.
Yeah,
It's
I think
still
we can't argue that it's not volatile anymore after this last run.
don't-
You know what I mean?
yeah.
There's just no way. You can't lose 80, 70, 80% of your value and then say, oh, no, it's not that volatile. Like, it's volatile.
This is to me a lot. This stuff is like a civilizational project. So we're still in the very early stages of discovery and what is this thing valued and how are people using it. So the volatility's here to stay. I don't think that'll change for maybe a couple decades.
Yeah.
Once it's really seeped into society where there's not even a reason to really talk about it on a
Right.
podcast anymore.
Right.
Then then it becomes you can just hold and it'll have a pretty stable value over time. But I think anything in the near term, it's gonna be volatile, and it's good. I like the meme. It's good to be a saver in general. And as more and more people come online and start using these networks, then you're going to have network effects, and that leads to some type of price increase. Because more people are using the resources. There's maybe there's less and less supply over time. More people are saving. Yada yada yada. There's price pressure, and there's no reason. There's nothing wrong with taking it off the table, and there's nothing wrong with using it.
Yeah, so I'm wondering specifically because, for starters, volatility. I mean, how many point of sale companies are there that are not using cryptocurrency, and their main complaint is either it's too volatile or it's not easy enough to use. So and to be fair, the amount of hodlers out there, I don't know what portion they are. You see the memes on Reddit and Twitter, but you don't know if those are the big whales that are really causing prices to go up or down. But when you have some crazy bull run where it's gone up like 10x in a year, at some point you got to wonder whether if that rate is not sustainable, then maybe it's good to have some sort of selling pressure during those bull runs, because we don't really. I honestly think the amount of volatility we saw this last year is really bad for the technology and for adoption and just in general for people's experiences with cryptocurrency. A lot of people, especially the mainstream people, they didn't get in early. Most of them get in October, November, December. And maybe they still make some money, but some people I'm sure get fleeced. And I don't really know if how would I say this? I would rather have a little bit more consistency or like a slow ramp up, which I think is inevitable. I think the volatility doesn't really offer much, if that makes sense. If you're a company and you want to do point of sale or you want to do any sort of cryptocurrency related stuff, and maybe you think your revenue is going to come in cryptocurrency, if there's a bunch of volatility, you're going to be a lot less likely to do that. If you have less companies using it, then that's a less of a network effect. I think in general it's detrimental when we have as much volatility as we've had. Also, when everyone's hodling, it's like they're not using. They're being encouraged to not use it. Like don't how would I say it? Don't trade. Don't pay your buddies in crypto. Hold on to it. It's like no, we need people using it.
Yeah.
We need a lot more people using it. And I noticed this because I work at a we both work at a cryptocurrency wallet company, and still when I'm with my friends and stuff, if I want to pay them cryptocurrency, either I don't feel like doing it because I think the price is going to go up, or they or they don't want it because it's not as usable, it's not as liquid, and there's not enough of a network effect. And all these things kind of play together with how successful the cryptocurrency is. And it's remarkable how rarely I use cryptocurrency. As much as I would think that I use it a lot because I work at a company like this, it's just most of the people I interact with, the people who own stores, people who are my friends, who I owe beer money to or whatever, most of them are not that interested in taking it. We're just not there yet.
No, not at all. Not at all. And I mean, we've talked about this before, but, we have really good payment rails in the West, and the U.S. dollar and the U.S. central bank is really good at optimizing the dollar for consumerism, right? So they're really concerned about keeping that price level stable not for long-term value accumulation, but for facilitating retail payments and facilitating an equilibrium for consumers, so that there's not wild price swings for them. Now, I don't like that about the money. I'm more of a saver, so I'd rather see value accumulation over time, not not a stable equilibrium for consumers. But that's how our system works right now, and it's gonna take a long time for Bitcoin or any of these cryptocurrencies to have any type of real stable value, I think.
Right.
Because we just still haven't worked out how to value it, and it hasn't really infected the mainstream in any type of meaningful way.
Yeah, this actually brings up a good point that I was thinking about last night, and I wasn't sure if I was going to bring it up as a topic, but I figure it's worth going into. So I'm a developer. I'm on what they call the front end, and that's kind of the area where I help build the stuff that users actually see and interact with. So like buttons, if you're swiping this way or that way, if you're clicking on things, stuff like that. But a lot of people wondering, well, why does it take so long for things to be built? And for starters, obviously, you're talking about people's money, so they have to test it. They have to be very careful. But there's also this concept kind of layers within programming and coding. So on one hand, you have the very basic people, not basic, the people who work on like, okay, what are the actual computer chips doing, right? And then you have the people who write the language that interact with those computer chips. And the next thing you have something like the Bitcoin Core guys who take those languages and actually start building some sort of blockchain thing, right? And then you have people who create APIs for those blockchains so that other languages can interact with the blockchain. And then you have people who are like our core developers who are doing the core of an app that interacts with those APIs. And then you get to someone like me who's like, okay, well now I'm that last layer, the icing on the cake, if you will. But each of those have to happen in a sort of cascading. One relies upon the other. So even if you're talking 6 months per layer, that takes years before it gets to me. And that's just the nature of it. The things happen in layers. The way that specialization works, you don't have anyone who's good at all of those layers. That's just not the way that it works.
And that's why I think this thing is a civilization has layers, very complex.
Right.
No one understands every layer of a civilization, and no one's going to understand every layer of what makes a cryptocurrency work. And that's why it's going to take a long time. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm in it for the long haul. Right? This is like a new system,
right?
And I know this is the people that have been in it have been those pioneers, rebels, crazy people, and we have like a kind of a first and second wave of new pioneers, new rebels, and every couple of years there's going to be more and more until there's like a critical mass and it just takes off.
Right.
And you're like the internet just didn't. It's become more culturally relevant than the broadcast mediums.
Right
now, but that didn't happen overnight. That was kind of a dream.
It took several years,
a couple decades, right? And then all of a sudden, boom! It just kind of flipped, and I think you kind of saw that flip in 2016, 2017, and the same thing.
For cryptocurrency.
No, I mean for media. I'm just talking about media in general.
Okay,
the internet.
That's an interesting.
But so I think we're on that same path. But the existing financial systems. They do what they do, and they've been doing it for a long time, and it's going to take a lot.
And they're decent at a lot of the stuff they do, for being
100%,
honest. Right?
Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, Bitcoin to me introduced digital scarcity, and the central banks have really destroyed the concept of scarcity in money, and Bitcoin brought it back, and that's what kind of brought me in.
Yeah, it's been somewhat surprising how long things take. And last year I was thinking, and it's silly to think of it now looking back, but when the price was going up, I was like, okay, well maybe this is it finally going mainstream. Like maybe the sky is the limit. When it was at 20K, I was like, well, maybe it'll keep going up to 100K.
Yeah.
And hindsight is 2020, but in retrospect, it's like, no, this is not. We're not quite mainstream yet. We're not quite usable. We're not scaling well enough. The apps are not there. They're not usable enough. And we are, unfortunately, years away from that. That's just the nature of it. But it is kind of reassuring because we are working in the industry, so there is a little bit of that, like, okay, well, maybe I have some good like career security here, right?
Yeah,
Job security.
that's what most people like. You're focusing on the price there, and the deceiving thing about prices, it's kind of like what the last guy paid the last guy on the exchange, right? So and it has nothing to do with reality, right? It has everything to do with what is some dude willing to pay, or some gal willing to pay some other gal for that last coin,
Right.
And that human psychology can change on a dime, and it does. But what you don't see underneath the surface is just the amount of people and energy and money going into building out those different layers that Kylan was talking about.
Right.
And it's not going to stop.
Yeah, and if you want it to happen faster, I feel like I'm lecturing people when I say this, but if you want things to go faster, then consider getting involved. It can be as simple as joining one of the local meetups or helping organize or anything like that, volunteering for certain things, or maybe even working within the industry. A lot of people, you see that thing where they're nudging the Bitcoin with a stick, and I feel like a lot of people feel that way, like do something. It's like, no, why don't you do something to make the Bitcoin actually, or cryptocurrency, go up in value, or whatever it is that you want to see. All right, so I think that's enough for today. We ran a little bit over. I guess we are just long-witted and have a lot to say.
We're just so excited about cryptocurrency.
We love the sound of our voices, don't we?
I love
All right.
decentralization.
Like we mentioned, we are on live every Friday, noon Pacific time. So if you have your questions and comments, feel free to throw them our way. The easiest way is to go to at Edge Wallet on Twitter. So until next week, this is Brett and Kylan. Take care, guys.